Thank you very much for the warm welcome to Seoul. And thank you very much also for the theme of this conference. The idea that technology should be put to work on big problems has been something that's been central to my work. And I'd love to see the theme here of coexistence and the theme of how we can use technology for good to be an important part of our technology world going forward. So congratulations to the Seoul Digital Forum for putting out that idea. So I want to start with a quote from Edwin Schlossberg. He once said, "The skill of writing is to create a context in which other people can think." And that's something I've done a great deal in my career, framing issues in such a way that people can see more deeply, not just into the future, but into the present, and how the present is shaping the future. And I want to talk today about the extraordinary convergence of computing and human potential that literally is taking us towards a kind of global brain. Now, this is actually something that Kevin Kelly has talked about for many, many years, and perhaps during the Q&A later we'll be able to get to that. I'm going to start, though, in a somewhat unexpected place, talking about the Google autonomous vehicle, which hardly looks like an example of this global brain or collective action at work, and yet it is. Because you see, in 2005, when the US DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, put out their grand challenge for autonomous vehicles, the winner went 7 miles in 7 hours. Yet only 6 years later, Google announced that they had a car that had gone hundreds of thousands of miles in ordinary traffic. What was the difference? Was it better artificial intelligence algorithms? John McCarthy, the computer pioneer, said the science and engineering of making intelligent machines was his definition of AI. And so when IBM's Watson computer beat human champions at Jeopardy, this looks like a triumph of artificial intelligence. And so too does that Google autonomous vehicle. But there's a secret here. Peter Norvig, the chief scientist at Google, said, "We don't have better algorithms, we just have more data." And the really important thing is, what is that data and where did it come from? And it turns out that it was the Google Street View vehicles that were gathering that data. Now, if you've ever seen Google Street View, you know that it's a way that you can see the buildings and the landscape features along your route because Google photographed the roads with a car looking like this. But that car was also making very, very precise measurements of location. They literally have laser interferometry where they're measuring the distance to the buildings shown in those pictures within an accuracy of millimeters. And so the Google autonomous vehicle is actually remembering that data. And that data came from humans driving those Street View cars. So anytime that automated vehicle is going on this seemingly magical route, it's doing it with the memory of augmented humans augmented by sensors. And as Peter said to me, it's very hard to pick out of a field of view of a camera, say, a traffic light. But it's very easy using AI to pick out whether it's red or green if you already know that it's there. So this is surprisingly an example of what J.C.R. Licklider, who was a legendary DARPA program manager who funded TCP/IP, the foundation protocol of the internet, wrote in a paper in 1960 called Man-Computer Symbiosis. He said, "The hope is that in not too many years, human brains and computing machines will be coupled together very tightly, and the resulting partnership will think as no human brain has ever thought, and process data in a way not approached by the information handling machines we know today." Now, back in 1960, Licklider was not thinking about the kinds of things that we're doing today, but he clearly had the right idea. I've used the term harnessing collective intelligence as the key characteristic of modern applications. applications like Google or Facebook or Twitter are ways of bringing our minds together. And so too, surprisingly, is this Google autonomous vehicle. So here is what my argument is, that we are building a network-mediated global mind. Now, it's not the Skynet of the Terminator science fiction movies. It's us augmented by sensors and by computers. And I'm going to try to talk to you a little bit about some of those kinds of augmentation. But let me first go to a humble example that was first proposed by computer scientist Danny Hillis in a conversation with Jeff Bezos, who then recounted it to our Emerging Technologies Conference in 2005. He said, global consciousness is that thing responsible for deciding that pots containing decaffeinated coffee should be orange. Now, I don't know if that's true here in Korea, but in many parts of the world, there's a company called Sanka, which was the pioneer in decaffeinated coffee. Their brand color was orange, and it became a kind of universal symbol on coffee pots to represent decaffeinated. So somehow this idea, this meme, spread from mind to mind and went beyond the brand to become a relatively universal symbol. Now, this is exactly what's happening at much, much higher speed with Twitter. So, for example, a new meme like Occupy Wall Street, the hashtag OWS, sprang up last year and suddenly was known by millions, tens of millions, perhaps even hundreds of millions of people. Now, this has always been the case, of course, with media, back from the first medium, spoken language, through written language, through the book, through television, radio, and all forms of media are really about spreading knowledge from mind to mind. But it's increasingly real time. In fact, Kevin Kelly told me a remarkable anecdote this morning. He met a woman in the audience who is unable to hear. And because there's no assistive technology here, no captioning, no interpreter, he said, how are you following the talk? And he said, well, she said, I'm looking at the slides and I'm following the Twitter stream. So here is technology being used to augment a human and our collective intelligence helping to shape the experience of a single person. Of course, this technology can also be used to organize people. Here is a copy of the Facebook page that by some accounts played an important role in triggering the Egyptian revolution. These technologies for sharing, collaboration are computer mediated, but they have humans at the heart of them. But it doesn't have to be complex technology. Take Wikipedia. Wikis are very simple. You remember when there was the great earthquake in Japan last year. This is the first Wikipedia page, a few bare facts. Yet over a period of months, here's an animation of how that page was augmented by thousands of volunteers bringing in thousands of facts through thousands of updates to make a full-featured account of the disaster. So that's collective intelligence at work, mediated by the internet, but also by a simple kind of technology, the wiki. Michael Nielsen, in his book Reinventing Discovery, which is about the application of networks and social technology to science, wrote, Wikipedia is not an encyclopedia, it is a virtual city. A city whose main export to the world is its encyclopedia articles, but with an internal life of its own. I highly recommend this book if you want to understand how these principles from social media and the consumer internet are applying to other areas of our society. But I want to move on to talk about something that's also very important in this new world, and that's feedback loops. Now, back in the late 19th century or early 20th century, the department store magnate John Wanamaker famously said, half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is, I don't know which half. Now, that comment about advertising, we've gone a long way towards solving with pay-per-click advertising of the kind that Google uses. They figured out a way to harness the intelligence of users to predict what people would click on, and a business model that allows the advertiser to pay only when somebody actually takes action. This is creating a new kind of feedback loop in advertising that increases the knowledge that is carried out in the entire system. It makes it smarter. We're seeing this same approach being taken in areas like healthcare. You know that we're engaged in an attempt at healthcare reform in the United States. A big part of it is something called accountable care organizations, where you're actually measuring outcomes rather than actually paying for the number of procedures. This is very analogous to what happened in advertising with Google. We went from paying for just showing ads to actually paying for actions taken on ads. And they're now trying to apply this to healthcare. And the president of the GE Medical Diagnostics Unit, Pascal Witz, made a point about how this will reshape healthcare. She said only 1% of healthcare spending now goes to diagnosis. We shift from this idea that you do diagnosis at the start, followed by treatment, to a cycle of diagnosis, treatment, diagnosis, as we explore what works. So this is a story about feedback loops mediated by technology, making us all smarter. And in particular, in many of these cases, it's feedback loops from millions of people expressing what they're doing at once. We're seeing this increasingly mediated by sensors. For example, in San Francisco, they recently released an iPhone application that lets people find available parking spots. This is made possible by sensor technology in the parking spots reporting up to the cloud. And this, of course, means that the entire city becomes kind of an organism mediated by this electronic brain to help people make smarter decisions. This is an animation that appeared in Wired magazine a few years ago of 311 calls. These are calls that people place to the government to ask for various kinds of services. It's really a snapshot of 24 hours of New York City. What did people contact the government about? So here's a visualization of this collective mind at work. Now, extracting meaning from this kind of data has become the basis of many new businesses. And there's a concept that has become very popular in the United States to call these people data scientists. This is actually a free ebook called Building Data Science Teams that we published to show people about these new kinds of skills. And the graph shows demand as demonstrated by job postings and job requests on LinkedIn, and you can see it's going vertical for this cluster of skills. But there's another aspect to this story of man-machine symbiosis that I want to return to. In one of the other seminal documents of the early computer industry, Vannevar Bush wrote an article in the Atlantic magazine in 1945 called As We May Think. And he talked about the notion of how computers would augment humans' ability to retrieve information. And he said, one cannot hope to equal the speed and flexibility with which the mind follows an associative trail, but it should be possible to beat the mind decisively in regard to the permanence and clarity of the items resurrected from storage. Now, of course, that's exactly what we saw with the Google autonomous vehicle. But it's also what we see in so many of our smartphone apps. That device knows where we are, has new senses that we didn't have, the GPS. You know, I could be dropped anywhere in Seoul, and I can find my way around. This is really just the beginning of something really profound. We're going much further in this direction. This is actually a point about information retrieval. In healthcare, IBM Watson is now being used to become an assistant to the doctor. Most physicians have about 5 hours a month to read up on the latest medical literature. Yet Watson can read 200 million pages in the 3 seconds that it took to come up with the Jeopardy answer. And IBM is turning this to healthcare. Now, those documents were provided by humans. So once again, this is showing us that we're building a man-machine symbiosis. When Watson becomes an assistant to a doctor saying, have you thought about this procedure? It's because the computer can read far more documents far more quickly and come up with possible answers. It's a guide. It's not actually doing the diagnosis, but it's suggesting things that the doctor might want to consider. Now, that's information retrieval as a kind of augmentation. We've seen it on the consumer internet. We're now starting to see it in the professional internet. And I think that's the real significance of projects like Google's Project Glass. It's not necessarily that we're all going to be walking around with eyeglasses that augment us. That would make for very awkward social interactions and be like somebody always checking their phone. But I think in a professional setting is where we'll first see this, where augmented humans are going to be having additional information retrieval options in real time. And of course, we already see the glimmerings of this. In an Apple store, the clerks are enabled with smartphones to do things that would be unthinkable to retail clerks even a few years ago. And Apple has found a way to make those salespeople much more skilled. And this same concept is now being applied in areas like healthcare. You can imagine a home healthcare worker. The US Chief Technology Officer, Todd Park, and I were talking about this notion that home healthcare workers will be required to be able to pull in massive amounts of data, sometimes from sensor monitoring of patients who are at home, to be able to look after patients outside of a clinical setting. This, again, is a set of feedback loops enabled by sensors, humans as part of the loop, information retrieval, a system that's bigger than any one part. So my point here is that the global brain is us, connected and augmented by both sensors and the ability to remember. Now, this is being used also for new kinds of business models. Patients Like Me is a site in the US that allows patients of life-changing diseases to share their symptoms, their success with various treatments. Jennifer Polka of Code for America talks about how, in her TED Talk, which is well worth watching, when you use technology to let citizens help each other, you actually do far better than when you simply turn to government for the answers. This technology can enable us to solve social problems. And of course, the latest sensation, Kickstarter, allows people to come together through technology to collaborate, to fund projects that they think are worthwhile. But probably the most striking use of collective intelligence to bring people together using sensors and smartphones, maybe the disaster response to the Haiti earthquake. There was a group put together that used, called Crisis Commons, that used a variety of technologies to deal with the earthquake. There's a technology called Ushahidi, which uses smartphones or texting to report information in a collaborative, crowdsourced way. But of course, in Haiti, with the earthquake, they didn't have maps to be able to report the locations. So the OpenStreetMap team got together and actually mapped the slums in as close to real time as possible so that people could report where people were trapped in the rubble. But it didn't end there. The reports were in Haitian Creole, but the rescuers didn't actually speak Creole. So this was sent out via sites like Crowdflower and Sahana to be translated in real time by members of the Haitian expat community, and then you could guide rescuers to the location with messages in their language. But this technology of collective intelligence isn't always used for good. We see disturbing stories about how our financial industry, which is using, in many ways, collective intelligence to draw on the market, becomes manipulative and starts using collective intelligence to trade against us as a people. This is an article in Foreign Policy, how Goldman Sachs created a food crisis by speculating on food commodity prices. This is the global brain used for ill. So that leads me to my concluding question. As we think about the future of this technology of man-machine symbiosis, this passage towards a global brain, we have to ask ourselves how we can make the emerging global consciousness not only smarter and more capable, but also more moral. Because you see, we've only got one world, and if we become collectively the global brain of that world, we have got to get it right. We have got to have that brain be smart, able to tackle the big problems that the world faces, but also to know and care and to work on stuff that matters. Thank you very much.